Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. I hope you guys all had a very nice week. I wanted to start off this week's lesson with a reminder of how the schedule is going to go. So we finished Mark last week in class, and Matthew is a really long and very interesting gospel. So we're going to take our time, probably go through 5 weeks, maybe more, to really get into all the different stories and all the details on Matthew. I just wanted to give you a reminder here on this page of what the schedule is going to look like and just sort of prepare you for trying to get in depth both in these weekly presentations that I send out and the in-person classroom discussions that we have, because there's some really important details in Matthew that are worth hitting. This week's lesson is probably going to be a little bit shorter than what I've normally done, and what I want to do is give you a high-level overview of Matthew and really kind of focus in on who his audience is, because that's really important when we're going through all of these to understand who he is really talking to. So that's what I'm going to get into more on the next page. All right, so this is a page you've seen before. Previously, we had highlighted Mark because that one was written first, but Matthew is technically the first book in the New Testament, and it's the first of the Gospels. Now, what's key here is Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all very similar in the time frame, right? This is all about Jesus's life from three different people, but they're writing for three very different audiences, and that's the key to understanding this. Anytime when you're in school, when you're giving a speech or even writing an essay, you should recognize who your audience is. Is it the teacher? Is it the rest of the class? Is it somebody else? And it helps you really craft your story and craft your message. And that's what's really interesting about Matthew, Mark, and Luke in particular. So Mark, we had talked about, he was writing for Romans, right? So Romans didn't grow up in the Jewish tradition, didn't have the Old Testament background, right? And so it was more about explaining who Jesus was through teaching, through his actions, but there weren't a lot of references to any sort of prophecy. Now Matthew, on the other hand, Matthew was a tax collector, and he was one of the disciples of one of the apostles of Jesus, and he was also Jewish. So he knew he understood the Jewish faith and what he was taught as a youngster. And so he wrote this gospel mainly for Jewish people. And what he continues to go back to in his gospel is tying in Old Testament information with Jesus, because the Old Testament, if you remember, said, there will be the Son of God is going to come down, the Messiah will come down someday to save the world. And what Matthew in his gospel is writing about is, this is the Son of God that we learned about in the Old Testament. So he's writing this for Jewish people to convince them that Jesus truly is the Son of God. And you'll see a lot of references to the Old Testament, to go back to convince the audience that this is the person who was prophesied. So as we move to page 4 here, I want to go through the aim of this entire gospel. So this is one of the longer gospels. There's 28 chapters. That's part of the reason we're going to take our time to really go through it. And it's really broken into 3 main pieces. There is a short introduction, chapters 1 through 3, and it lays out the genealogy of, again, going back to the Old Testament, of Abraham and David, and it's a list of names of person A begat person B, and it lays out all the sort of the history of the families in Israel, and it gets to Jesus, right, and it talks about Jesus's birth. And then you have this key sort of body section that's really cut into 5 main pieces with sort of a key takeaway at the end of each section. And it really goes through Jesus's life and his teaching. So you've got things like the Sermon on the Mount and parables about the farmer throwing various grains everywhere, which we talked about in Mark. So it's interesting too that he uses 5 sections here in this body, because it's again a throwback to the Old Testament and the Torah, which were the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So you get these callbacks to the Old Testament here, and it should hit home for the audience who, again, were Jewish followers who he's trying to convince that Christ is the true Son of God. And so after he goes through these 5 various sections, there's a conclusion, right? That the last section is where he's confronted. He confronts the leaders at the time, and the conclusion really is Jesus is sentenced to death, and he rises, right? He's risen at the end of this book, just like it was in Mark. And he gives instructions for spreading the word. So, it starts with laying out, here's Jesus. He's the true Son of God. We were expecting this from the Old Testament. And it ends with, he was killed, but he rose. He is telling us as Christians to keep spreading the word. And as we go through, when we go in deeper, we'll see this more. But again, it's this idea that what he's talking about to his audience is this link, right, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It was prophesied, and it's happened, and Jesus is the true Son of God. And it goes through trying to convince people with all this evidence of healing and teaching and spreading the word and going through his life to convince the audience that he's talking to that Jesus really is the true Son of God that was prophesied. So this on page 5 is the basically the story arc, right, of the body. So after Matthew walks through the birth of Jesus and how he's from the line in as described in the Old Testament, he goes through some very, very key pieces of Jesus's life in the middle chapters here. So the first section is about announcing God's kingdom, right? And he goes up to the mountain. He does a Sermon on the Mount explaining God's kingdom, and there's some really strong parallels to Moses. That Moses went up on a mountain and got God's laws, right, of the 10 Commandments. So this is sort of a mirroring of what we saw in the Old Testament for Jesus. And again, prophesized early on that there's going to be somebody more powerful than Moses coming at some point. So that's what Jewish people know around this time. And so again, Matthew is sort of reinforcing this idea that this is the person who we told you about or we learned about in the Old Testament. And then the second section in Matthew is bringing this new kingdom to the people. And so he, at the end of this section, he introduces his disciples, of which Matthew is one. Then there's a section of the people in that area and at the time, how they responded to Jesus, right? And so there were people who were accepting and believers, and they were followers, and they took this information in and believed he was the Son of God. And then there's other people who were not entirely sure, right? I mean, clearly they had their doubts still, even after hearing all this information. And then there was a group of people who really didn't believe and thought he was blasphemous. And what's interesting about that is those were typically the most religious people, that even though they were told the Son of God was coming, these were typically like the Pharisees, right? They were very strict, and I think they believed that the king was going to be this very strong person. We talked a little bit about this in Mark, not a person who isn't a powerful military guy, right? And so you had these people who didn't believe at all, and in fact accused Jesus of being a blasphemer, right? So you've all these various responses to these teachings, and Jesus has a lot of parables about this in Matthew's middle section here. Then after that, there's a whole section about Jesus explaining his new kingdom, right? What it means to be, what this kingdom really is. And what it is it's almost like, you serve and you sacrifice, and, the people who are kind of on top are poor and who need help, not the powerful. And so it's really a flipped up story of a kingdom, which again sort of confuses people, that how can this be? It's really, we've lived in this time where it's always a powerful person is at the top of the heap, and he flips it upside down almost. And then the last part is the clash of this new kingdom. So Jesus goes to Jerusalem, and again we see this overlap with Mark's Gospels of, they're telling this similar story, but just from different angles. So Matthew is talking to, people who were, Jewish faith, and explaining when Jesus went to the temple, and there was this conflict with the existing Jewish leadership, and how that, gets resolved, and ultimately how that leads to Jesus' death. But it's very sort of interesting that, again, Matthew's explaining to his audience how Jesus truly is the Son of God, but has to go through all of these things to ultimately sacrifice his life for the prophecy that was given in the Old Testament. So I'm going to leave you with that, because I want to get into each one of these segments in more depth. Hopefully starting next week when I see you, we'll kind of maybe go through the first one, see if we can get to the second one. But these are really key, and there's just so many good stories in all of these. But what I want to leave you with is, remember the audience, right? This is Matthew talking to people of the Jewish faith who understand the Old Testament, and these Gospels are really a follow-up to what they learned growing up. So with that, thank you, and hopefully you have a great week, and I will see you on, I think it's November 1st. So enjoy your Halloween. Take care.